Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for rocking with us on the weekend. We had originally planned to do this conference on a Friday to Saturday schedule, but my good up friend, my homie, the Dr. Onisha Etkins, just successfully defended her dissertation yesterday on intersectionality theory approaches to mental health in the Black community. So big ups to her, and that's part of why we're doing this on the weekend. But we are so grateful to you all for being with us and being here to witness the beautiful brilliance, boldness that our collaborators and panelists are going to share with us today. All right, so before I get into it, I'd like to provide a content note to let you know that our conference welcome mentions violence and systemic harm. So please take care of yourselves during and after listening. And if you need additional support, please click on the support resources link or the rejuvenation space link on page 25 of the conference handbook in the conference link section. So as we gather in this virtual space, we acknowledge that the ground beneath our feet is historically the home of Indigenous peoples, many of whom have been forced to leave for other lands. In particular, we acknowledge that the headquarters of Zoom, which is the platform on which we are all congregating virtually, that it's located on the unceded land of the Ohlone, the Indigenous peoples of the land now known as San Jose, California, in the United States. Let us also acknowledge the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Indigenous people of what is now known as Massachusetts and Eastern Rhode Island in the United States, on whose land Harvard University is located. And as Onisha and I are from the Caribbean, from Guyana and Jamaica respectively, we also want to acknowledge the Indigenous keepers of the lands our families inhabit in the region, notably the Yamayeka and the Warao peoples, in addition to the Taino, Kalinago, Carib, and Lucayo people around the Caribbean, among others. And we additionally offer a special acknowledgement to our ancestors, the Indigenous peoples of Western Africa, who were stolen and enslaved, who died, who rebelled, who became the Maroon people, who persisted, who survived, and whose exploitation and deaths our university and countless other institutions have benefited from and continue to benefit from to this day without providing appropriate reparations. With this, we also acknowledge that in our academic world, folks have a very Western hemispheric sense of Indigenous peoples, but there are Indigenous people all around the world. So this is about not only where we stand or where the school stands, but also about where we stand in relation to others around us. We know that Indigenous people are not a people of the past. They are here with us now and continue to fight for their sovereignty. And this is personal to Onisha and me, because as Black Caribbean people, we know that there is no Black liberation, no liberation of any other people without Indigenous sovereignty. And we uplift the fact that Black and Indigenous people around the world, and specifically on Turtle Island, which is also known as North America, have been in solidarity for centuries as they resist oppression and reclaim their freedom. As the Aboriginal rights group from Queensland, Australia says, our liberation is bound up together. So if there are Indigenous people on this call, you are invited, if you feel comfortable to do so, to share your tribe or your nation in the chat box so that we may recognize you. And I'll give a few moments for that. So many Indigenous people have rightfully critiqued the performativeness of land acknowledgements because they are often made with little to no accountability. They've called for the acknowledgements to be backed up with actions, the primary ones being giving the land back and paying land taxes. And so in the chat box, our volunteer will place a link to a list of actions, and we are asking you as attendees to commit to at least one of them. These actions speak not only to what Indigenous communities are requesting and demanding from non-Indigenous folks, but also speak to supporting some of the historically and currently oppressed communities facing dire circumstances due to kyriarchy and systems of oppression like capitalism, neocolonialism, queer antagonism, xenophobia, extractive tourism, and others. And these actions are especially for those of you at this conference who are not directly affected by the violence against Black, Asian, Latine, Latinx, Indigenous, Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiian communities, but are beneficiaries of the historical, systemic, and cultural violence against these communities as the descendants of colonizers and imperialists. Your liberation from those terrible histories are bound up too. And so, as you and your own communities work towards healing from the harmful legacies you've inherited, actions like the ones we've listed in the document are for you too. So throughout the conference, please look out for the actions link in the chat box, as well as in the conference link section on page 25 of the conference handbook. All right, so switching gears a little bit, I would like to offer a poem that many of you might recognize. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-whites and women, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me every day that something has tried to kill me and has failed. And that poem is by world-renowned Black American poet, Lucille Clifton. And so this conference is done in honor of all of us from historically and currently oppressed backgrounds who live in systems that have tried to kill us and failed us and continue to kill us and fail us, who deserve to have more pleasurable, healing, and liberated experiences and lives in which we are healthier, happier, and freer, who are now trying to do our best to move beyond surviving to get to flourishing. This is worthy of celebration. All of the self-soothing, self-care, community care, and structural care that we engage in and take actions toward to get us beyond survival as the end goal. And so it would be remiss for us not to mention that the past week has been incredibly hard for so many of us. I mean, this past pandemic year has been ridiculously challenging and incredibly mentally taxing in so many ways. To varying degrees, we're exhausted from feeling deeply, from feeling angry, from feeling hurt, from feeling unsurprised, from feeling anxious, from feeling everything and nothing at the same time. No matter where in the world we live, neither limited capitalist notions of justice or false accountability will bring back the people whose lives continue to be callously taken away, period. And so we name the systems that cause us harm, but we don't put our belief, our faith, our trust in them. We believe in people, in our chosen families, in our communities, in those who look after us and each other, in those who continue to do what they need to do to ensure collective survival. Because our people are really good at survival. And so this weekend, we focus on the efforts of people from these historically and currently oppressed backgrounds to imagine and reimagine, to claim and reclaim what it means to ensure our existence in the future, move towards collective restoration and flourishing, and cultivate joy and pleasure as we engage in the things that make life well lived and worth living as human beings. And it's not lost on us, the irony of this conference being funded through an institution like Harvard, which has benefited and continues to benefit from the exploitation of Black, Asian, Latina, Latinx, Indigenous, Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiian peoples. But this conference is not about the institution. As organizers, our intentions are to use whatever resources we have access to create community and support the communities that nourish us when institutions don't and won't. We don't play when it comes to truth-telling and naming harms and desiring better lives and worlds for ourselves and our communities. And that's what this weekend is about. Truth-telling and hopes and desires grounded in our lived experiences. Through this conference, we are gathering in community to, one, utilize the power of collective imagining to center communities' joys and ambitions for their present realities and futures. And two, to explore sustainable community resilience and what it means to deliberately choose pleasure and healing, especially when the systems that govern our world make it incredibly difficult for us to do so. This conference centers artistry, embodiment, and scholarship, grounded in desire-based lenses, a framework coined by Dr. Eve Tuck that uplifts communities' self-defined visions for what they want to see and how they want to be in the world. Dr. Tuck is an Indigenous Unanga scholar in the field of critical race and Indigenous studies. And she wrote a letter to her community called Suspending Damage, asking them to reconsider the long-term impact of letting in outsiders who only conduct damage-centered research. And a desire-based framework is one that creates holistic representation by centering community stories about themselves rather than relying on stereotypes about those communities. It honors complexity and lived experiences and makes space for contradiction and self-determination. And so we have encouraged our collaborators to consider what taking such an approach might look like. The goal is to highlight nuances instead of controlling for them, to not lead with negative stories, but to uplift the fact that communities are actualizing better futures on their own terms with resources they already have, extrinsic and intrinsic to themselves. In this way, our collaborators are disrupting, or at least bringing more intentional self-awareness to established academic disciplines, and are putting forth an expansive understanding of knowledge production and the simultaneous existence of multiple truths. Together, we are taking control of our narratives. And those of us who are graduate students from historically and currently oppressed backgrounds, we are making moves towards being in charge of who and what gets studied and why and how. This is especially true for explorations of centering pleasure and healing and restoration, tenets of pleasure activism and healing justice as we work towards social change. Some may not see these as revolutionary, but we do need joy and we do need rest in order for us to continue to fight against the systems that are oppressing us. And so I end this with love, accountability, and pride in how we engage in liberatory and restorative and community resilience work, particularly during times of crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic, to keep us seeing new days and new beginnings when the world seems to end every night before. And just a few guidelines for engaging in our conference as we spend time together this weekend. Please note that we are here to support and amplify the work of all our presenters and collaborators. We ask that you learn their names, that you properly credit and cite the brilliance and boldness they are sharing with you this weekend. And Onisha and I do not engage in respectability politics at all, so please do not bring that into our virtual spaces. This may be a conference funded by an academic institution, but the repressive notion of professionalism, whatever that means, does not apply here. And we don't have time to co-create community agreements this weekend, but we hope that all conference attendees can agree to uphold at least these three. 1, impact is greater than intent. 2, challenge assumptions. And 3, use agender liberated or agender expansive language. And in the participatory sections of the conference, we also ask that white people do more listening, and instead of taking up space, that they make more space for the voices and contributions of other attendees whose communities this conference centers. And with that said, Onisha will briefly get into some of the conference details.
Thank you, Sherine. Y'all, Sherine is so poetic in everything that she says and writes, and I love just listening to you speak. I need a podcast of just Sherine. Welcome, everyone. My part of this is going to be a little less poetic. I'm going over some of the logistics for the conference. Overall, I hope that you have downloaded the conference handbook. That should be your kind of one-stop shop for everything, including the Zoom links throughout each of the sessions. I will quickly share my screen so that you can see what that looks like. So here is the handbook, and if you scroll down to the schedule page, all of the Zoom links are hyperlinked by the times. So hopefully that'll make it a bit easier for you to navigate, as well as throughout the handbook where the descriptions of each of the presentations are, we've included the links there too. And if you scroll to the very end of the handbook, past the panel presentations, you'll notice that we have a list of additional links that we encourage you to check out, including the action items that Sherine mentioned, a working list of the bios for all of our collaborators during this conference, a feedback survey, which we'll tell you more about tomorrow, the playlist of all of the songs that you all contributed during registration, and we'll be playing this throughout the breaks. It is so good, like, wow. And then we co-created a Padlet, and we see this as just a rejuvenation space to feel uplifted, to feel inspired, to step away from the conference as needed. And then a list of support resources for more in-depth space to process and heal. And so you can check that out as well. I know I'm going pretty quickly, but take your time and go through the conference handbook throughout the day. But overall, this conference originally, we had kind of 5 themes we were focused on, including reclaiming joy in sovereignty and self-determination, the creative arts and embodied knowledge as fluid sites for liberation, finding pleasure in connecting with the natural and supernatural and beyond, passed down and remixed healing and restoration practices, freeness and reimagining and reveling in the expansiveness of gender and sexuality. And originally we had these 5 themes as 5 separate entities. And as we started moving through the conference planning, we were like, all of these are so connected. So we encourage you as you go through the rest of the day to try to see the sites of connection throughout those 5 themes. We also have 4 offerings, including keynote presentations by Taja Lindley and Carla Moore, movement offerings. Sherine and I, we love to dance. Like, no matter what type of day we are having, I'll hit Sherine up and I'll be like, yeah, I needed to just have 5 minutes to just like put my music on and dance in my mirror. And that's our way of processing. So we wanted to bring that into the conference. There are so many ways of expressing our emotions, of expressing our feelings, etc. And sometimes, verbal expression doesn't capture it all. So we need to move through it. So we hope that you can join us in doing that in whatever capacity that you can. The panel presentations, we bring together a series of brilliant human beings who will be sharing their thoughts and experiences with the themes mentioned. And then our collective imagining workshops. Sherine and I talk a lot about kind of tapping into our inner child and like thinking about, how expansively we thought as children and the ways that sometimes adulthood can try to take that away from you. So we hope that these spaces of collective imagining can be a space for us to, as Sherine mentioned, just imagine futures for ourselves, imagine present versions of ourselves as well, and just engage with that in a creative way. And so again, check out the handbook for more information on that. And we are super excited to move through this day with you. This conference is very much a reflection of community care. And throughout this planning process, also in some ways a reflection of me and Shireen's friendship, honestly, like the ultimate homie. And I hope that you feel that throughout the day and throughout tomorrow as well, if you can join us then. But I don't want to take up too much time before we move into our first panel presentation. And you can check out the Zoom link for that, for the first panel that we'll be moving into. But we hope you all have a beautiful day, and we'll be checking in. You'll be seeing plenty more of our faces and our voice, so get used to it. But with that said, let's get into it.
All right, and so as we transition to the next panel, in the chat, there's the link to the next session. So you can click on that link to take you to the Zoom room, or you can use your handbook as you go along. So we'll see you in the next one.